Every single morning, without exception, without question, and without a single word of complaint, the maids at Balmoral Castle must curtsy to an empty room. Not to a king, not to a queen, not even to a senior member of staff. To nothing. Just air, silence, and the faint trace of a royal presence that had already walked out the door seconds before. If that sounds strange to you, hold on, because that rule is not even close to the strangest thing happening behind those thick granite walls. In fact, compared to what eventually came out, curtsying to empty rooms sounds almost reasonable. Because what these workers eventually discovered, what caused dozens of them to pack their bags and walk away overnight, was something far darker. Something the palace never wanted the world to know. Something that, once it got out, forced the royal household to completely rewrite their rules from the ground up. This is the real story of Balmoral Castle. And nobody talks about it. In the summer of 1852, a man made a purchase that would quietly reshape British royal history forever. Prince Albert, husband to Queen Victoria, came across a rain-soaked advertisement for a Scottish estate tucked deep in the Cairngorm Mountains. He was immediately drawn to it. The landscape was dramatic. The air was clean. The isolation was total. And most importantly, nobody was watching. So he bought it, quietly, for around $32,000 at the time, which would equal roughly $4.4 million today. And here is the part that people rarely mention. He did not even tell Queen Victoria right away. He made the purchase alone, in private, and presented it almost as a surprise. That decision, made in secrecy, far from London, away from Parliament and press and public opinion, set the tone for everything that would follow at Balmoral for the next 170 years. Within a few years, the original house on the estate was torn down completely. A brand new castle was constructed from pale white granite, finished by 1856, and designed with Prince Albert's personal fingerprints on nearly every detail. He sketched the clock tower himself, modeling it after a design he remembered from a German castle. He insisted the bell ring in a flat tone rather than a sharp one, specifically so it would not frighten the horses and ponies grazing nearby. He placed stone carvings of all 9 of his children near the entrance. He deliberately built the interior hallways narrower than usual, not because of budget constraints, but because he believed that if the corridors were tight enough, family members would naturally bump into each other more often. He thought this would bring them closer together. In some ways, it was a deeply human idea. A father who believed that proximity created love. In other ways, it created a castle that would become one of the most tightly controlled, intensely secretive, and quietly painful workplaces in all of Britain. The estate expanded steadily over the following decades until it covered more than 53,000 acres, larger than the entire city of San Francisco, larger than Paris. It included mountains, forests, over 150 individual buildings, its own private power supply, and a small railway line built in 1866 for the sole purpose of moving royal luggage in complete secrecy. And through all of it, Balmoral remained something that surprised even many British citizens when they found out. It is not public property. It does not belong to the nation. It belongs personally and privately to the royal family, which means every deer sold, every cottage rented to a tourist, every timber deal made. All of that money flows directly to the family. Members of Parliament raised objections over the years. The response from King Edward VII was blunt. He called it their inescapable refuge and refused to discuss the matter further. The message was clear from the very beginning. What happened at Balmoral stayed at Balmoral, and the people who worked there were expected to make sure of it. During the height of the royal season, nearly 150 workers live and operate on the Balmoral estate simultaneously. Think about that number for a moment. 150 human beings living inside a mountain estate, cut off from the outside world by a single long road, bound by agreements of total silence, working hours that would be illegal in most modern workplaces, for wages that left many of them struggling. The staff included gamekeepers known as gillies, horse handlers, cooks, cleaners, laundry workers, groundskeepers, and at least one man whose entire job, his only job, every single morning at 7 a.m., was to stand beneath the king's window and play the bagpipes. Every single employee, from the most senior butler to the youngest kitchen maid, signed a lifelong silence agreement upon hiring. Not just a standard non-disclosure clause, a promise tied in some cases to the Official Secrets Act, meaning that breaking it was not merely a career risk. It carried potential legal consequences. And the silence was not just about what you said outside the castle walls. It applied inside them, too. Workers were forbidden from speaking unless directly spoken to by a member of the royal family or senior staff. In practice, this meant that during the busiest periods, breakfast service, dinner preparation, the chaos of hunting season, staff members communicated entirely through hand signals. A tap on the shoulder, a nod toward a doorway, 2 fingers raised to mean the kettle is ready. Balmoral's corridors became, as one former worker described it, quieter than a library. But not from respect, from fear. In July 1986, a maid who was dusting a room made the mistake of visibly reacting when she overheard Prince Charles speaking quietly to Princess Diana in the next room. She did not repeat what she heard. She did not write anything down. She simply paused. The next morning, there was a written warning on her bed. The rule was explicit. Staff were never permitted to register what royals said, not in expression, not in reaction, not in any visible way. A first violation brought a written warning and the threat of losing a seasonal bonus worth $250. A second violation meant immediate dismissal. $250 sounds small. But for workers earning approximately $18,000 a year in the early 1980s, for 60-hour weeks in a full-time live-in position, that bonus represented a meaningful portion of their take-home income. The male gamekeepers on the same estate earned roughly $26,000 annually for work that was considered more skilled and more prestigious. Many of the female housemaids made the decision after a single season to simply leave. The turnover among young women was constant and consistently ignored. Royal historian Patrick Thorncraft later described the environment plainly. It created a quiet tension that was never openly discussed, but always felt, like standing in the cold while wearing silk gloves. You might assume that a royal estate operating in the modern era would have, at minimum, kept pace with basic labor standards. You would be wrong. Vacuum cleaners were banned at Balmoral. Not temporarily. Not as part of a renovation. Banned because Queen Elizabeth disliked the noise they made. As a result, every morning, 2 maids would kneel on the floor and push horsehair brushes by hand across the carpets in long, slow strokes. Cleaning a single hallway could take 45 minutes. The dust accumulated so heavily that their aprons had to be rinsed out twice a day just to keep them functional. In 1990, the head housekeeper calculated that this single rule, the vacuum ban, added approximately 9 hours of labor to the daily workload. 9 hours. And salaries did not increase to reflect it. Many workers said their wrists ached so badly by the end of a shift that they struggled to hold their cutlery at dinner. Nobody filed a formal complaint. Nobody expected one to go anywhere. The days began at 6 in the morning, when junior maids entered the oldest kitchen to begin polishing more than 200 pieces of silver by hand. Breakfast had to be served by 8 a.m. Then came long walks through cold stone hallways carrying heavy tea kettles, quietly enough not to disturb the royal dogs sleeping near doorways. Lunch preparation involved peeling 18 kilograms of potatoes. Staff then changed into fresh uniforms for afternoon tea at 4. After tea came the hunt debrief, which meant cleaning muddy boots. Most nights, workers reached their attic bedrooms around 9:45 p.m. 15-hour shifts. No overtime pay. The justification for this arrangement was printed clearly in the old staff manual. The exact line read, "Loyalty is its own reward." One former may describe the experience as giving your life to a shadow without ever hearing thank you. Those attic bedrooms, by the way, were not heated properly until 1994. Temperatures inside them dropped to as low as 4 degrees Celsius on winter nights. Hot water was available for exactly 30 minutes each morning. During a particularly bad rainstorm in August 1992, an iron fuse failed and flooding damaged the laundry system, forcing staff to dry sheets over large kitchen stoves while working in gloves. It was only after an independent audit in 1995 exposed the living conditions that basic plumbing improvements and proper heating were finally installed. For more than a century, the castle had looked perfect on the outside. The carpets gleamed. The silver shone. The fires burned in all 50 fireplaces, fed by approximately 60 tons of birchwood every season. And underneath all of that polished perfection, people were quietly suffering and saying nothing about it, because they had promised not to. In March 1988, a French magazine published an article that sent shockwaves through the British royal household. It had been written based on the account of a young woman who had worked at Balmoral for just 8 weeks the previous summer. She was paid approximately $10,000 for her story, more money, as she noted herself, than she might have earned across 8 full years of royal service. In exchange, she gave them everything. She described the dinner routines in precise detail. She wrote about private moments she had witnessed between family members. She revealed which of the royal dogs slept near which bedroom doors. She described the architecture of daily life inside the castle with the kind of specific, intimate knowledge that only someone who had lived and breathed it could possibly possess. Within 48 hours, every major British tabloid had picked up a story. Millions of people were reading details that had been locked behind those granite walls for generations. Some of what she revealed was surprisingly tender. She described a formal dinner in August 1987 when a visiting guest accidentally drank from the decorative finger bowl placed beside his plate, mistaking the rose-scented water for a light soup. The guest realized his mistake a moment too late. The table went quiet. Then, without hesitation, the Queen lifted her own finger bowl and drank from it. One by one, every member of the royal family sitting at that table did the same. Staff counted 17 empty finger bowls afterward. The maid wrote that the gesture stayed with her longer than almost anything else she witnessed. A family that would rather drink perfume than allow a guest to feel embarrassed for a single second. There was a grace in it, quiet, instinctive, and genuine, that no protocol manual could have produced. She also described Charles and Diana during that period as appearing genuinely happy. They were seen holding hands when they thought no one was watching. Charles sometimes fetched Diana's coat before outdoor picnics, without being asked. Diana quietly slipped tips to young stable boys after morning rides. But kindness, the maid was careful to note, did not change the conditions for the people working around them. Not all of her revelations were soft. She described the summer visit of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in 1987 as filling the estate with attention that was almost physical. According to her account, Thatcher was not housed inside the castle with other guests, but placed in a distant cottage that the staff had nicknamed, among themselves, Siberia. The palace denied the claim immediately and firmly, but observers noted that Thatcher missed the following morning's grouse hunt, and the tabloids had no shortage of theories about why. The royal household's response was swift and furious. Within hours of the story breaking, an official statement was released describing the article as a gross breach of trust. An internal investigation was launched almost immediately, covering all 348 staff members who had worked at Balmoral during the relevant season. Security protocols were rewritten overnight. New employees were now required to undergo extensive background checks before being hired. Every new worker had to sign a formal legal secrecy clause directly linked to the Official Secrets Act. The spoken oath that had previously been administered in a quiet hallway decorated with stag heads was replaced with a legally binding document. The message was delivered without ambiguity. Speak to the press, and your career was finished. Not just at Balmoral. Anywhere in royal service, anywhere the palace's influence could reach. For many workers, the investigation itself was its own punishment. Being interviewed about your loyalty, having your background examined, being asked to prove your silence, it made something that had felt like a private sacrifice feel suddenly very transactional. Like the family did not actually trust the people who gave their wrists and their sleep and their voices to keep the castle running. Several workers quietly resigned that same season, and the secrets continued to escape anyway. Years after the 1988 incident, A former worker sold a story revealing details about the Queen Mother's private habits and Prince Andrew's specific demand for exactly 28 golf balls to be available at all times during his visits.